Mama Chima was shocked, almost speechless. You will never marry a girl like that, she shouted. You are too good for her, Chima. What will people say? But Chima shook his head. I don't care about what people say, Mama. I know how I feel. Nneka is a good person, and I won't leave her. Chima was a man many people admired. He was young, wealthy, and lived in a big house in the heart of Lagos. His company made millions every year, and he drove fancy cars that everyone envied. But despite all his money, something was missing. Chima couldn't explain it, but he felt empty. He had everything, yet he wasn't happy. One day, as Chima was driving home from work, he noticed a girl by the roadside. She was sitting under a tree, holding crutches by her side. Her clothes were old and torn, and her eyes looked tired. She had no shoes, no food, nothing. The girl, Nneka, was crippled. Her legs didn't work well, and she struggled to even stand. Chima stared at her as he drove past, thinking to himself, another beggar. Lagos is full of them. He didn't slow down, didn't stop. After all, he had his own problems. But for some reason, as Chima continued driving, a sense of unease settled in. It wasn't guilt, no. Chima was always seeing beggars, but there was something different about Nneka. Maybe it was the way she looked so helpless, sitting alone with her crutches, or the sadness in her eyes. He just couldn't get her off his mind. The next morning, Chima got into his car and headed for the office as usual. As he passed by the same street, there she was again, Nneka. This time, she was trying to cross the road, her crutches making it hard for her to move quickly. Cars zoomed past, and she was stuck in the middle of the road, struggling to take the next step. Chima slowed down without even thinking about it. He pulled over and watched her for a few seconds. People were walking past her like she didn't exist. Nobody offered to help, and something inside of him snapped. Eh? Is this how we treat people now? Now, wow! Chima muttered to himself. He got out of his car and walked towards her. When Nneka saw him approaching, her eyes widened. She didn't expect anyone to help her, especially not a man who looked so important. Oga, I am trying to cross, she said softly with a shaking voice. Chima didn't say anything. He just reached out and helped her cross the road. Once they were on the other side of the road, she looked up at him, surprised. Thank you, sir, she said in a quiet voice. Her eyes was filled with gratitude. Chima nodded, but didn't respond. He turned and walked back to his car, but her voice stopped him. God bless you, sir. People like you, I don't see them often. Chima paused for a moment, feeling something stirred inside him. He looked at her, but instead of saying anything, he just nodded again and walked away. As he drove off, her words stayed over and over in his head. People like you, I don't see them often. All day at the office, he couldn't stop thinking about her. That simple thank you stayed with him, lingering in his mind. Why did he care so much? She was just a girl, a homeless, crippled girl. But something about Nneka haunted him. Why do I even care? Chima asked himself as he stared outside his office window. But deep down, he knew the answer. That girl had touched something inside him, something he didn't know was there. Chima's life was about to get more complicated. His mother, Mama Chima, had been on his neck for months. Chima, you are not getting younger. All your mates are married. You have money, a big house, but no wife. What are you waiting for? She would always say every time they spoke. And now the pressure had reached its peak. There was a big family dinner coming up, and Mama Chima wasn't taking any chances. She had invited Uju, the girl she wanted Chima to marry. Uju came from a wealthy family, and that was all Mama Chima cared about. But Chima couldn't stand Uju. She was proud, always talking about money and never caring about anything else. Chima had tried to avoid the dinner, but Mama Chima wasn't having it. You must bring a date, Chima. Uju will be there, and I don't want you coming alone. Chima couldn't bear the thought of being stuck with Uju the whole evening. He needed a way out, and very fast. As he sat in his office, staring at his phone, an idea popped into his head. Nneka, he had helped her the other day, and for some reason, she hadn't left his mind. What if Chima couldn't believe what he was thinking? But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He could ask Nneka to pretend to be his girlfriend for the night. She didn't know his family, and his family didn't know her as well. But would she agree? Would a homeless, crippled girl really help him? That evening, Chima drove back to the same spot where he had seen Nneka. As he pulled up, there she was, sitting under the same tree, looking even more tired than before. Her clothes were still old and torn, and she was holding her crutches tightly. Chima got out of his car and walked over to her. Nneka looked up at him, surprised. You again? She said softly. Chima handed her a small pack of food. Here, eat something first, he said, watching her carefully. She took the pack and opened it and began to eat slowly. He could see how hungry she was, and it pained him. Nneka, I need your help, Chima finally said after a few moments of silence. Nneka looked up at him, confused. My help? She asked, wiping her mouth. How can I possibly help someone like you? Chima sat down on the ground next to her, ignoring the strange looks people passing by gave him. I have a family dinner in a few days, he began. My mother keeps pushing me to get married, and she invited this girl, Uju, who I don't like. I need someone to pretend to be my girlfriend just for one night. After that, you can go back to your life and I will pay you well. Nneka blinked, staring at him in shock. You want me, a beggar, to pretend to be your girlfriend? She asked. But why? Chima looked into her eyes and said, because I know you won't ask for anything. You're not like Uju or the others. You don't care about my money. Nneka didn't know what to say. This was the strangest thing anyone had ever asked her. But at the same time, she was hungry, tired, and needed help. Could she really say no? Chima could see the doubt in her face. Nneka, I know it sounds crazy, but I will take care of you. You don't have to worry, just one night, and I will make sure you are comfortable. Nneka took a deep breath. She was scared. She didn't know this man well, but he had been kind to her. What if your family finds out? she asked. They won't, Chima replied. Just dress nicely, smile, and play along. And after the dinner, I will give you the money, and you can leave. It will be over before you know it. Nneka looked down at her crutches, feeling unsure. She had no other option. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, I will do it. Chima smiled for the first time that evening. Thank you, Nneka. You won't regret this. Nneka wasn't sure about that. She didn't know what she was getting herself into, but she had made her choice. Now, all she could do was hope that this strange deal would turn out in her favor. The day of the dinner finally arrived. Chima was nervous, though he tried not to show it. Earlier in the day, he took Nneka to a hairdressing salon and then to a boutique. When she came out of the changing room in the new dress he had picked for her, Chima was stunned. Nneka looked completely different. Her long hair, neatly dressed, made her look so beautiful, and the dress fit her perfectly. But it wasn't just the dress, it was the way her eyes shone with life. Her usual sadness was hidden, replaced by a shy, beautiful smile. Are you sure this is me? Nneka asked, looking down at her dress. Chima smiled. You look perfect. Don't worry, just be yourself, he said, though he wasn't sure how things would go at the dinner. That evening, they arrived at his mother's house. The moment they walked into the grand living room, all eyes turned to them. His uncles, aunts, and cousin, they were all there, chatting and laughing, but now they were silent, staring at Nneka. Mama Chima, who had been talking with Uju's parents, looked up sharply. She frowned when she saw Nneka standing beside Chima. Who is this girl? She asked coldly. Chima took a deep breath and stepped forward. Mama, this is Nneka, my girlfriend. The room went completely quiet. Chima's family members exchanged surprised glances. But before anyone could speak, Mama Chima stood up. Nneka, eh? Where is she from? She asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked Nneka up and down. Nneka was feeling nervous but tried to stay calm. Good evening, ma. I'm from Anambra, she said, her voice soft but steady. The room remained tense. Mama Chima wasn't pleased. She had expected Uju, not some unknown girl. I see, she said, her tone filled with suspicion. Before Mama Chima could say more, Chima's younger sister Amaka stood up. Welcome, Nneka. Come sit down. You look beautiful, she said with a warm smile, pulling Nneka to a seat beside her. The other family members slowly warmed up. They asked Nneka simple questions about her background, and though she was nervous, she answered them honestly but carefully. She spoke simply, not trying to impress anyone. Soon, they were chatting and laughing with her as if she had been part of their family for years. But Mama Chima sat quietly watching. Her face was still hard. She didn't trust Nneka, just not yet. After the dinner, Chima drove Nneka back to her usual spot by the roadside. They sat in the car for a moment. Chima handed her an envelope. Here is the money I promised you. You did great tonight. Nneka took the envelope slowly, but she didn't open it. She looked at Chima and asked, So, is this goodbye? Chima paused. He had thought this would be the end of their agreement, but something didn't feel right. No, he said after a moment. I will see you again. I will bring more food tomorrow. Nneka nodded and smiled softly, but she didn't say anything else. She got out of the car and disappeared into the night. But as Chima drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about her, her smile, her kindness. It was different. She wasn't like Uju or the other girls he had known. She didn't care about his money or his fancy lifestyle. She was real. Over the next few days, Chima found himself driving to see Nneka more often. Sometimes he brought her food, other times he just sat with her and talked. They talked about everything, their lives, their childhoods, their dreams. Nneka's warmth began to melt Chima's cold, guarded heart. Nneka too began to look forward to his visit. She had never imagined that someone like Chima, a rich man, could care about her, a homeless girl with nothing. But Chima was different. He wasn't just helping her out of pity. He was kind and he listened. He saw her as a person, not just a beggar on the street. One evening, as they sat in his car, Nneka turned to Chima and said, "Why are you still helping me? You've already done more than enough." Chima smiled, looking out the window. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe because you make me feel like I'm not alone." Nneka didn't know what to say. She felt the same way, but she was too afraid to admit it. As the day went on, Chima realized something else. He didn't want Nneka to just disappear from his life. But one thing was clear. This was no longer just a simple arrangement. Something real was growing between them, and neither of them could deny it. Uju could feel something was wrong. The dinner hadn't gone the way she wanted, and Chima had barely spoken to her since then. But it wasn't just the silence that bothered her, it was Nneka, that strange girl who had appeared out of nowhere. Chima seemed to be spending more and more time with her, and that made Uju furious. How can Chima, a man of his status, choose someone like that over me? She thought to herself angrily. One day, Uju decided to follow him. She needed to know what was going on. So she got into her car and quickly drove behind Chima as he left his office. Her heart raced with suspicion and she held the steering tightly. Eventually, Chima stopped near the familiar spot, the roadside where Nneka usually sat. Uju parked a little far and watched. To her shock, she saw Chima get out of his car and walked towards Nneka. Uju's eyes widened as she saw him sitting with the homeless crippled girl, talking and laughing like they were old friends. Is this a joke? Uju whispered to herself, her jealousy growing. How can he be spending time with a beggar? She watched a while longer, growing more and more upset. This was not just a game. Chima actually cared about Nneka. How could someone like Chima fall for a girl who had nothing? She couldn't let this go on. "I will fix this," Uju muttered to herself, her mind already plotting how to ruin Nneka's life. Uju didn't waste any time. The next day, she drove straight to Mama Chima's house. The older woman welcomed her, but Uju could see that Mama Chima was still upset about Nneka. "Good afternoon, ma," Uju greeted. "Uju, what brings you here?" Mama Chima asked, sitting down with a sigh. "I haven't been able to sleep since that dinner. Chima has been acting strange." Uju leaned forward. "I found out the truth About that girl, Chima's so-called girlfriend, Nneka. She is not who she said she is. Mama Chima looked confused. What do you mean? Uju smiled wickedly, knowing this was her moment. Nneka is not from a good family. She's a beggar, a homeless girl from the street. I saw it with my own eyes, ma. Chima always visits her by the roadside like some secret lover. Can you believe it? Mama Chima's eyes widened in shock. What? Nneka is a beggar? Has Chima been lying to me? Uju nodded, enjoying the moment. Yes, ma. He's hiding this from you, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. Mama Chima was furious. She stood up immediately. This cannot happen. My son, a rich man, marrying a girl like that? No, I won't allow it. She stormed out of the room, determined to confront Chima. Later that evening, when Chima returned home, Mama Chima was waiting for him. Her face was hard with anger. Chima, is it true? She shouted the moment he stepped inside. Chima frowned, confused. What are you talking about, Mama? Nneka, she yelled. That girl you brought to the dinner. Uju told me everything. She's a beggar from the street. You've been lying to me all this time? Chima stood for a moment, knowing the truth was finally out. He couldn't lie anymore. Yes, Mama, Nneka is homeless. She helped me at the dinner, but I didn't lie about my feelings. I love her. Mama Chima was shocked, almost speechless. You will never marry a girl like that, she shouted. You are too good for her, Chima. What will people say? But Chima shook his head. I don't care about what people say, Mama. I know how I feel. Nneka is a good person, and I won't leave her. After the argument with his mother, Chima knew he had to see Nneka. He couldn't let her hear about this from someone else. That evening, he drove to her usual spot by the roadside. Nneka was sitting there, her crutches beside her, looking up at the stars. When she saw Chima, she smiled, but her smile faded when she saw the worried look on his face. What's wrong? She asked, sensing that something had happened. Chima sat beside her and took her hand. Nneka, my mother found out the truth. Uju told her everything about you. Nneka's heart sank. I know this would happen, she said softly. Your family will never accept me, Chima. I'm just a homeless girl. I can't even walk properly. They will always see me as nothing. Chima shook his head. No, Nneka, I don't care what they think. I love you. I don't care if you don't have money or if you can't walk. You are strong, kind, and real. That's all that matters to me. Nneka looked at him with tears in her eyes. Chima, I never thought someone like you could love someone like me. I have nothing to offer you. Chima quaintly wiped away her tears. You don't need to offer me anything. Your heart is enough. Nneka smiled through her tears, but there was still fear in her eyes. But your family, they will never accept me. Chima held her hands tightly. I will fight for us, Nneka. I will stand up to my family. I don't care what they say. You are the woman I want to be with. Nneka looked up to him, her eyes filled with emotions she had never felt before. She had lived her life full of pain and rejection, but now, for the first time, someone was standing up for her. I love you, Chima, she whispered, finally letting the word out. Chima smiled, feeling the weight lift from his chest. I love you too, Nneka, and I promise we will get through this together. Deep down, they both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The battle for their love was just beginning, and there was still many obstacles to overcome. Weeks passed, and despite the tension with his family, Chima stood by Nneka. No matter how hard things got, he never wavered. His brothers and sisters began to see what he saw in her. They noticed her kindness, her strength, and the way she made Chima happy. Slowly, they accepted her. But Mama Chima was still against the relationship. Every time Chima visited her, she would bring it up. Chima, can't you see? This girl is not for you. Mama Chima would say, shaking her head. You deserve better. Someone like Uju, who comes from a good family, a wealthy family. Chima remained calm but firm. Mama, I've already made my choice. I love Nneka, and nothing will change that. Mama Chima sighed. She couldn't understand why her son, a rich man with so many options, would choose a homeless, crippled girl. But she could see how serious he was. Meanwhile, Uju wasn't done with her tricks. One last time, she tried to spread lies about Nneka. She told people that Nneka was only using Chima for his money and she had a secret past. Don't trust that girl, oh, Uju whispered to everyone who would listen. She's hiding something. The rumors started to reach Chima's ears, and even some family members began to doubt Nneka. But Chima refused to be shaken. He confronted Uju directly. Uju, stop this nonsense, Chima said coldly. I know what you're trying to do, and it won't work. You can say whatever you like, but Nneka is the woman I love, and I won't let anyone ruin it. Uju, seeing that she had lost, backed off. Her heart burned with anger. One morning, after all the drama had cooled down, Chima went to his mother's house again. This time, Mama Chima was quiet, lost in her thoughts. She had heard from Chima's siblings about how much Nneka had changed his life and how happy he was with her. Chima, Mama Chima said softly, are you sure about this girl? Are you sure this is what you want? Chima smiled. Yes, Mama. Nneka has nothing to give me but her heart. And that's enough. I've never been this sure about anything in my life. Mama Chima looked at her son for a long time. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the love he had for Nneka. Finally, with a deep breath, she nodded. If she makes you happy, then I will support you. Chima's face lit up with joy. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for understanding. Soon after, Chima and Nneka began to plan their wedding. Despite everything they had been through, their love grew stronger. The day finally came, and they got married in a small, beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. But the biggest surprise came after the wedding. Chima had taken Nneka to see a specialist doctor, and after several surgeries and therapy sessions, Nneka began to regain strength in her legs. She was not fully healed, but she could walk, something she had never thought was possible. One evening, as they sat together in their new home, Nneka stood up slowly, taking a few careful steps towards Chima. Tears filled his eyes as he watched her. Nneka, look at you, Chima whispered, his voice filled with emotion. You are walking. Wow. Nneka smiled, holding his hand. I never thought I would walk again. But you made me believe in myself, Chima. You gave me hope. Chima pulled her close and kissed her forehead. It's because you didn't give up, Nneka. With that, they knew that nothing else mattered, neither money nor looks. True love had triumphed, and together they faced the future with hope and happiness. Hey, lovely people! Thank you for watching to the end of this amazing story of love, determination, and resilience. I would be happy to hear from you in the comment section about what you learned from this story and your thoughts about it. I'll be there to respond to your comments. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. Your support means the world to me. Do not forget to give this story a thumbs up and turn on your notification bell. Thank you for watching and see you in my next story.